All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, Brooke, can you turn up wireless for Brooke? Hey, Brooke, can you turn up wireless for? Good morning. You can hear. Can you guys hear? Yep. Okay. Good morning. We're going to get started. Um, I'm happy to introduce Marna Crow for our adult forum this morning. Marna and I are meeting today, so I'm grateful that she's here. Marna is a new member of our congregation, and she worked in obstetrics for many years and was involved in delivering many babies, and eventually said, "Hey, I could probably do this," and decided to study to become a certified nurse midwife. So she's trained in both nursing and midwifery. Is that the right way to say it? She went to the Frontier Graduate School of Midwifery and Family Nursing in Hayden, Kentucky, and focused on care and treatment for low risk pregnancies, normal newborn care, and well woman care. She has experience with C-section births and other procedures. She's worked as a certified nurse midwife for 20 years and delivered approximately 1,500 babies.
Yep.
Yeah. And
I have a
so,
record of all of them.
wow,
I have
wow.
kept books. Yeah.
So we thought Advent was a perfect time to hear from you, and these types of things and your experiences in bringing new babies into the world. So thank you
Thank
again for
you.
coming.
I haven't, can you hear me? Okay. I haven't done something like this since I taught Lamaze about 25 years ago. Oh, yeah. Well, as it said, I'm a certified nurse midwife. And when I was in nursing school back in the early 70s, we went through different rotations. And when I hit obstetrics, that's when it occurred to me that that's what I was going to do. And of course, it took me about 6 years to get into OB because at that time you had to have experience before they would hire you. Well, how do you get experience, right? You got to find somebody who will take you on. So thanks to the United States Air Force, I took on OB and they trained me. And then from then on, I worked in OB for 18 years as a labor and delivery nurse and did various different positions there. I even managed a labor and delivery unit in Florida where we did 175 babies a year, or a month, excuse me. So I tried to learn as much as I can when I was doing that. And so many times when a woman's in labor, as many of you know, labors can turn on a dime and you'll have a baby in 5 or 10 minutes. Well, when your doctor is 10 blocks away or a mile away, he's not going to get there in time. So we ended up doing a lot of deliveries on our own. And that's when I decided I can do this. And so it took me a little while to go through the hoops and jump through the process of getting into midwifery school. And then when I did, I started practicing in 1998 in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. And there was one obstetrician there at the time. And I had worked with her as a labor and delivery nurse. And I told her I was going to go to midwifery school. And could I get a job there when I was done? And this community had never seen a midwife before. She knew what I was talking about. And the hospital in Fargo had midwives. So they knew, and we were in the same institution, so they knew what a midwife did. And she wrote a letter to them and said, I want to hire her. And so that's how I got started in Detroit Lakes, was through her. And then we worked together until she retired. But anyway, that's how I got started. And basically, nurse midwives are trained in the discipline of nursing first, and then they go to midwifery school. And the nurse midwife, the certified nurse midwife, generally practices in a hospital. She has admitting privileges with the hospital. And so when patients are admitted, they're admitted directly to her. And that was a barrier that I had to cross when I first started because they always thought a physician had to be on that chart. And I said, well, when you do that, you're making that physician responsible for everything that I do. And I don't think he wants to do that. So little by little, the barriers were broken down, and I admitted my own patients, took care of my own patients, discharged my patients. And one of the things we were trained to do when I worked in Florida was it was an all RN unit, and every RN knew how to assist a C-section, scrub a C-section, and circulate a C-section. So that's where I got proficient at that. So that helped me when I became a midwife because I already knew how to do it. So the midwifery school that I went to was in Hyden, Kentucky. And it was called the Frontier School of Midwifery and Family Nursing. And it was halfway up a mountain in Kentucky. They have since become a university. They've moved to Lexington. And so they have a little different configuration of how they do things. But it was a great school to learn from. And that school itself has an interesting history because of its founder, whose name was Mary Breckinridge, whose grandfather was Vice President of the United States under Buchanan, and her father was a French diplomat. So she did a lot of things with him in France, and she brought midwifery back to the United States. And that's how that all started. But so nurse midwives, as was said, take care of low risk patients. And we also do women's health. So we do some GYN. And we kind of become the experts in normal. What is normal? What is a normal labor process? What does a normal birth look like? So that you can recognize when something isn't going right. And how much time do you allow before you call in your backup? Backup is your obstetrician. And most obstetricians don't mind working with midwives. There's a few that don't like it, but most of them are pretty receptive. And when they say to you, hey, Marna, I've got to go over to this other clinic, but I got this patient in labor, will you watch her? That's a sign that, hey, he trusts me, he knows what I'm doing, and we're good. And that's generally the way it went for me, which I was very grateful for. But, and eventually the city itself came to recognize the midwife and what her position was. And through word of mouth, and your practice just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the women that seek out midwives have a certain idea of what they want in their labor. And back in the 80s, there was a big change in obstetrics. The birthing rooms became more popular. And so the midwives kind of worked in the birthing rooms, and the physicians were just backups. And so from then on, obstetrics, labor and delivery, everything's kind of changed so that there was water births, birthing balls, getting in the bathtub, walking around. You didn't have to stay in bed. You could get up and move. And you see it with natural births with animals. They don't just lay there. They get up and they walk around and they move around. And it does help with the contractions and the pain of contractions. So that's the one. Some women seek out that type of labor. And others are like, no, I want to go in, I want to get my epidural as soon as I can and, do that sort of thing, which is fine too. And I have those patients too. So, and some women do better if they have an epidural with their labor progress. And others want to experience, going through Lamaze and learning how to breathe with your contractions. And it just kind of keeps your mind in a different place other than on the pain of your contraction. And it's kind of fun to watch Lamaze patients and their husbands work together too, as a couple. Having a baby is a pretty intimate experience between couples. And I've had opportunities to involve the husband even more. I had a particular couple where they'd had 4 girls, and this was going to be their boy. And he was the wrestling coach at the high school. And I said, hey, you want to deliver your boy? And he looked at me and he looked at his wife and she said, go ahead. So I let him deliver his son. And so it was a very unique experience. And I also have let others, as I supervise, let them do some of the hands-on. Even the women themselves, as the head is delivered and the shoulders, I have them reach down, grab their baby and pull it on up to their chest. And some of them just were like, that is so empowering for me to do that. And so some women don't want to do that, and others do. So it's kind of a flex, do one thing or another. But um, it helps. It helps to have, you always have to have an obstetrical backup, meaning an MD who's behind you. Because if you do have to have a C-section or need help with a delivery for shoulder dystocia or whatever, postpartum hemorrhage, all those things that can go wrong, you have to have a backup who's willing to come in and help you. And fortunately for me, I had that. Most midwives do. So anyway, generally speaking, delivering babies is a happy event. It excites everyone. And there's nothing, and I delivered a lot of Native American babies because of the location I was at. And so when a Native American has a baby, the room is full of people. There's no restrictions on who can come in. So grandma's sitting over there in a wheelchair and she's got the biggest grin on her face when that baby comes out. And otherwise there'll be half the tribe out in the hallway waiting. So it's a social event for them and it's very exciting to watch. Some don't want anyone in there. My mother-in-law out here. You're like, gotcha. Sign goes on the door, right? Check at nurse's station. But so yeah, everything is different, but you just go with the flow. The nurse midwives are the only ones who deliver in hospitals, but they can also deliver in birthing centers. And there are several birthing centers around the United States. They always have physician backup or they have a hospital nearby, but most the labor and delivery is all done in the birth center. Generally speaking, they don't do epidurals in a birth center because you have to have a medical facility available for that. So most of it's all natural, as they say. Water births became very popular for a while. I had one couple that wanted to do a water birth, and I said, sure, I'm fine with that. But the hospital didn't like it. So they ended up going somewhere where they allowed them to do that. So you deal with various things like that that come along. And it all works out in the end. It's pretty good. And that once you've been there long enough and you're established, most people are generally amenable to what you suggest to them that you do. Like I said, most of the time, birth is a happy time. And sometimes it's not so happy. Sometimes you have to tell patients if you see something on their ultrasound that's not going to be, it's not going to be good. It's going to be life-threatening. And to have to sit down and tell them that is very difficult to do. Or an unexpected delivery or unexpected event at a delivery that you didn't know about. And obstetrics has changed so much with our ultrasounds that most things are seen on the ultrasound so you know what you're dealing with. And that's very difficult and traumatic for people. So in that event, counseling, that sort of thing is part of your practice as well. And to let them know there wasn't anything they did or they didn't do that caused that. And then like Christmas presents, babies come in all sizes, shapes, and packages, you know, and women are all different. Their bodies are all different. And so that's part of the labor process. Not everyone has the same labor and not everyone has the same delivery. And I'm sure all you know, when women start talking about their delivery experiences, it's like men talking about their fishing experiences. Everybody's got a better story to tell. So, and that's true. Everybody's are different. So, in that respect, I enjoyed what I did. I knew it was a calling for me. And I had to quit doing it because I got sick. I got cancer. And so I had to stop doing deliveries. And then I couldn't go back to doing it. It was just too hard being on call for 24 hours. I used to, was on call 24/7 for all of my patients. And so sometimes I would have 2 deliveries a month, sometimes I'd have 15. So it all just depended on how things went. But after I got sick, I just couldn't do it anymore. And the risk of infection with the blood and that sort of thing, I just had to avoid. So it was kind of a downside for me. But at the same time, you could go to bed and know the phone wasn't going to ring. It was a little more restful. So I did a little statistics this morning, and there's about 14,000 midwives, nurse midwives in the US, and Wisconsin has about 265, I think. There are certified midwives who are not nurses, and then there's professional midwives who are not nurses, and then you have lay midwives who are just people who pick up the doing deliveries. They don't have any, formal education sort of thing. But certified midwives and certified nurse midwives fall under the American Academy of Nurse Midwives. And so they're governed by them, where the others aren't. So, and those others cannot deliver in a hospital. They don't have admitting privileges. So most of them deliver like in a birth center or something like that, or at home. Now, nurse midwives can deliver at home, do home births. I've never done any because I work for a clinic and the clinic pays your malpractice. So they're not going to want you out there delivering babies in homes. But I have known nurse midwives that have done that. This one worked in the Amish community and did a lot of home births there. So it's a wide variety. There's not that many of us, but it's growing. It has over the years, and it's gotten more popular. So there's so many things I could say, but it's just like in my mind is just going crazy here. Yeah, Laura.
So I read recently that, there are a lot of hospitals in smaller towns, smaller communities that are sometimes outright closing,
Mm-hmm.
but a huge number, not some can stay open, but they are closing their maternity wards. And that means that there are deserts,
Mm-hmm.
where a woman would have to drive an
Mhm.
hour or more to get to a hospital that has a maternity ward,
Mhm.
and so I read about they mentioned that several hospitals, they don't have an obstetrician anymore, which means that the ER doctors are delivering the babies, or a hospitalist, but that some of these hospitals are now reaching out and trying to establish like a next door birthing center staffed by midwives
Mhm.
as a solution so that women aren't put at danger.
Yeah.
So I thought that, maybe there'll be a bigger demand for midwives now.
Well, they hope so. I think I saw this morning like 13% of all deliveries in the United States are done by midwives, and they want to increase that. But that situation is occurring in a lot of places. And for most labor and delivery nurses, calling an ER doc up to do your delivery is not what you want to do. It's not that they're just not they're trained. They have an obese, um, training during their process. But once you get to delivering babies all the time, you learn the finer points of it. And so the labor and delivery nurse is like, no, because it may not let them push long enough, or they may do an episiotomy when they didn't need one, and that sort of thing. It's not that they're not good at it. It's just that they're not doing it enough. It's like anything else, practice. Yeah.
Childbirth used to be a very dangerous, oh, like that? Boy, that's close. Childbirth used to be a very dangerous event for mothers and young babies. And I'm assuming that C-sections, when they came along, that it significantly reduced the morbidity and mortality. But I'm wondering if there's something also that helped reduce that morbidity or mortality.
Well, as far as nurse midwives go, their outcomes are really good. And when I was talking before about the gal that started the midwifery school I went to, she was in Appalachia. And their mortality rate in Appalachia was horrible. And when she started these, she brought midwives from England, set them in Kentucky. They rode on horseback out through Appalachia to these homes where these women were having pregnancies and births, and the mortality rate just sank. And so they're like, hey, there's something to this, and it's kind of the same thing. Well, I think it's because nurse midwives are trained in normal. They know what to look for, and they have a lot more teaching and counseling, and spend more time with their patients. And they're able to recognize, I think, when more problems occur, and can successfully, they can successfully get through it so that they have a good outcome. And maybe it's a lack of prenatal care. And so when they go to the midwife for prenatal care, she teaches them in their nutrition and education and what they can do and what they can't do, and what are you eating, what are you not eating, that sort of thing, which would help that as well. And a lot of those Appalachian women used a lot of herbal medicines and things like that. So some of that was good, some of it wasn't. So it's more of the education piece that helps the outcome, the prenatal care. And we used to get women coming in labor, ready to deliver, who've had no prenatal care. And so then you're like, what do we know about her, except that she's going to have this baby? Does she have diabetes? Does she have high blood pressure? Does she have some other problem? Why didn't she get prenatal care? And all those things. Was it financial? Is it, whatever? So I don't, hopefully, that's why the prenatal care is so important, is because they learn this. And then, of course, the woman has to be receptive to it. And so that's why the outcomes are better, I think. And then nursing itself, the labor nurses are so much trained now to spot a lot of things that are going on. And they're able to call the obstetrician and say, you need to get over here and see this lady right now. We have the fetal monitors, which came out like in the 70s. And now they're so much more advanced. They can record the contraction rates. They record the baby's heart rate. And it's like an EKG on the baby. And you can do it externally or you can do it internally. Both ways. You can put a little scalp electrode on that baby's head, and it gives you a direct EKG on the monitor. And then you learn to recognize and read that EKG, that little EKG and that sort of thing. So the outcomes overall in the United States have gotten better because of that. And I think more training, the more we learned about OB. And I remember going to a fetal monitor conference where the physician that was speaking, what he did was after a baby was born, he put the electrode back on that baby's head and watched it in the nursery, what it did. And so he learned a lot of information from that. And so then that type of stuff helps too, that you can recognize these patterns and stuff.
Are men entering and are welcome in this field?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of male midwives. And actually the one in Fargo was head of the obstetrical department because he had his PhD and he was a nurse midwife. So they put him in charge. But yes, there's males that have become nurse midwives as well.
Well, based on the question you raised, Laura, of the, say, a hospital staying going, but removing the maternity
Mhm.
wards, what is that about?
Well, I
And
think
why? And who covers? And I mean, all the whys of it.
in a lot of those facilities, family medicine docs used to do the deliveries and do the OB care. And so you're seeing a lack of family medicine docs out in the rural areas. They want to stay in the bigger institutions, that sort of thing, or bigger cities or wherever their families are. They don't want to go out and practice in a rural area. They don't want to be alone. And so I think and obstetricians as well. They're not, there's the old family doc just isn't there anymore. And that is a place where midwives can fill in if you have someone who wants to go out there and do it. Even when I started, the family medicine docs were still doing OB. But as soon as I started, they all quit. They said, we're not doing this. She can do it. And my contract said I had to do 14 deliveries the first year, and I did 40. So they're like, okay, she's hired. She can be here. But I think that's part of the reason is they just don't want to do the births anymore, and you don't have the physicians there to do them. So they don't have any other choice. And obstetrics is an area where you have to know fetal monitoring, you have to know what you're doing, you have to know the labor process, and you just, somebody random doing it is just not going to be beneficial. So, and there's a doctor shortage, I think, across the whole US.
And can I just put something in? The article that I read also said that OBGYNs are kind of in droves leaving states where there are abortion restrictions now. And so the so-called red states are really suffering from
They don't want to get in
staff
trouble.
shortage.
They
Yep.
don't want to get in trouble. When I worked as a labor nurse in Florida, at the hospital, this was in the mid 80s, whenever they discovered that there was a fetal problem with a fetus, no matter how many weeks it was, they brought him into the hospital and we did abortions in the hospital. And the nurses managed them all. The physician said, call me when it's over. And so we would do that. But these were babies who were anencephalic, they didn't have brains, or they had missing arms or legs or that sort of thing, and they didn't want to go to term. So then we would induce them and deliver them. And so I could see where that is a problem. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with the politics of it. And so many times politics and medicine get intertwined and it's gets in to be the problem. Yeah. So
Just to pick up on what Laura said, I don't want to clear my throat into the mic. I think the entire country is getting an education on OBGYN. I mean, these guys in the state legislatures who know nothing about medicine, some of them haven't even finished college.
yeah.
Which, I mean, you can have a career in politics without going to college, but you shouldn't be practicing medicine.
No.
And it's just really
Yeah.
horrifying what's happening.
Well, and see that, I think, personal opinion, that's what happened with COVID. You got politics involved with a medical issue, and it just messed everything up. But interesting enough, I just heard this the other day that I think it was UCLA or somebody's research program was discovering that some of the COVID virus given to cancer patients helped put them in remission. And yeah, there's something about the mitochondria and that what is in the COVID virus that affects the immunity of the person with cancer and it reduces their cancer. Now they're not going to give COVID to these people, but they're going to find out what it is that may help their natural immune system to fight it. So I thought, wow, you never know.
Following up on some of the comments, it seems to me like women, and I have a granddaughter that's in that age bracket, are really concerned about just general female health care, because if we don't have people and doctors who shy away from the abortion, then they don't get the training and there just isn't anybody there. And it has nothing to do with abortion, really. It has simply to do with female health and the potential maybe for that. But that's a big issue if you are a young woman and you don't think you can get female health care anymore.
Right.
And regardless of the birth part of it.
Well, and that's another thing that nurse midwives do is we do GYN as well. So we did a lot of well woman care, pap smears, birth control, STD screens, all that kind of stuff, bladder, issues. And you're right. If you're a woman and you want to go to see someone, you want to go to see someone that knows what you're talking about, And so I don't know how we fix that problem. I think we have to make med schools more cheaper, because when they come out, they owe so much money. And, in obstetrics, I would venture to say that there are malpractices more than a family medicine doc, and so that'll keep them out too. Yeah, they don't want to get sued. Yeah, their coverage is higher. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, nurse midwives have a good outcomes, and so more people seek out. Like I said, the right person has to find a midwife who wants a midwife. And the social distance between a nurse midwife and her patients is much different than social distance between a patient and her physician. Because I've heard them say to me several times, I'm going to tell you this, but I'd never tell him that, sort of thing. So there's a trust issue kind of a thing, or not so much a trust, but a commonality. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm going to tell you, I have one story to tell. I had a couple. They were both teachers. And she came to me before her first baby. And she told me she was going to have 6 kids. They were going to have 6. I'm like, okay. So um, they had their first 2, and he quit teaching. He was stay-at-home dad, took care of his kids, took them to hockey, big hockey player. Their son's first name was Bauer. So they had their 3rd, and they had their 4th, and then she was pregnant with her 5th, and she was 2 weeks from her due date, and everything had been fine. And I was sitting on my porch picking beans one Saturday, and for some reason her pregnancy came into my head, and something said there's something wrong with that baby. And I'm like, why am I thinking that? Just out of nowhere. Well, Monday morning, when I went to work, I found out she had called in saying she hadn't felt her baby move. And they did not have her come in. So I called her, and she came right in, and her baby had passed away. Her baby had died. And it ended up being a cord accident. So something between the placenta and the baby blocked the flow. And when the baby was born, half of it had all the blood in it, and half of it to the baby didn't have anything. So in my mind, I was like, why did that come to me? Was I supposed to have acted on that? Was I supposed to have called her and maybe scared her to death, saying, I just had this vision that something's going to happen to your baby? And I often think about that. Was that God warning me that I was going to be dealing with this issue? Or was I supposed to have done something? And I told other people, and it was like, I don't know if that was divine intervention. Why would I do that? Why would I suddenly think about her and there's something going to be wrong with this baby? And then it turned out that it did within 2 days, Yeah, I guess. And they went on and they had their 6th child, a normal, healthy baby. And her husband, who was an ex-Marine from Afghanistan, said to me, he said, I've seen a lot of things in Afghanistan, but this is probably the topper right here of seeing that baby born. So anyway, things happen without control. So,
Historically, weren't most births in the home, and they were delivered? Well, I found records that my grandfather was delivered by an aunt.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. My grandmother actually had a set of twins in her house. Yeah. They didn't know she was having them, my mom and her brother. She'd had a doctor there. He came, that's when the doctors would come to the houses, and she delivered the first one, and then he said, Mary, you're going to have another one. And she's like, well, what are we going to do? And he said, well, you're going to have a baby, So yeah, a lot were delivered at home, and there's lay midwives who do that. They just start doing deliveries, but they're not. The technical part of that is they're not licensed and that sort of thing. But back in the day, yeah, it wasn't until like around the 1900s that women started going to the hospital to have their babies. Oh gosh, probably in the 30s. like 1930s. They had to be licensed. And every state licensed midwives, nurse midwives. They don't all have license for some of the others. But certified nurse midwives and certified midwives are all graduate students, graduate degrees. They're all licensed. Yep.
Marna, I'm wondering if you could talk about the difference between a doula and a midwife, and if you ever worked with doulas when you were practicing.
A couple times. Doulas are basically labor coaches and labor support people. If someone's husband's not into it or they don't have another partner or whatever, they're there to comfort, get them what they need, help them, move around, position, that sort of thing. But they don't have anything to do with the actual medications or deliveries or anything like that. And nurse midwives have prescriptive authority. So we had DEA numbers so we could prescribe medications and narcotics and all that if we needed to, kind of a thing. But doulas are basic, they go through a training, so they learn the birth process and the stages of labor. And then what they can do to assist them in that specific, stage. So I know I just kind of winging this. I'm not into PowerPoints, I'm sorry.
Marna, maybe
birth-
one other.
Photos.
Oh, maybe one other question, and that's, you talked a little bit about, was God talking to you with this one case? Are there other examples or thoughts you have about how your faith played a role in the work you were doing?
Yes. And mostly it was after something had occurred that I didn't know about, like a fetal death in utero while she was in labor. And why it happened was, I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was wrong. Nothing signaled to me that there was an issue. And then they did an autopsy on the baby and discovered the baby had a narrowing of the artery, the aorta, in its heart, and that's probably what did it. But nothing showed up. And so then it's like, you ask yourself, why did these things happen? Why didn't I know it? I should have known it, but there wasn't anything there to tell me that. So yeah, you deal with, and mostly it's tragic kind of things. But that one particular instance is what stood out to me. And I think it was because we were connected and we still are. And we exchange, whenever I go back home, I see her. And her husband's still not working. He's still stay-at-home dad with his 5 kids. But, and we exchange Christmas cards and emails and stuff. So yeah, we were connected. And all we have to do is look at each other and we can kind of read each other's minds. There was that kind of connection. And you do have that with some women. So.
I seem to remember somewhere that there's a much larger, I seem to remember that there is a much larger problem with safe births for people of Black and other, some of the other types of
Nationalities?
yeah.
The only reason that would be a medical reason. In the pregnancy itself, probably not. But pregnancies, the thing about pregnancies is they affect every organ system you have. Your eyes, your skin, your kidneys, your lungs, your heart. You pump, 3 more times blood than you normally do because you got to pump that placenta and that fetus. And the fetus is actually a foreign object to a woman's body. And so your immune system has to drop in order for your body to accept that fetus and let it grow. So that's why pregnant women are more susceptible to illness and infections. But if you have a pre-existing condition like diabetes or hypertension, which is more common in the Black communities and Native American communities, not to mention some of the drug issues or alcohol issues, then you're going to have issues with the pregnancy, especially if they don't get the prenatal care that they need for somebody to monitor it. The largest baby I ever delivered was 11 pounds, 10 ounces to a Native American diabetic mom whose blood sugars were normal all the way through her whole pregnancy. And even the internal med doc that was watching her for her diabetes, he had to come and look at it. And he's like, I don't believe this. She was fine. But that's kind of the things that'll happen. And those babies, they just look like little marshmallows because they're, you know, just little chunky things. They got little chubby arms and kind of like, you know, a little Michelin guy. But they're so cute. And they're just babies, you know, they're just newborns and they're like this, but they're just so. A 25 weeker, I think maybe just under a pound. Yeah. And that's hard to see too, because she goes into labor, maybe her water, she has premature rupture of membranes and the baby delivers, and you have this little tiny thing in your hand and it's trying to breathe and it has no lungs, you know, and they just gasp and it's tough, you know, it's hard. It's hard for the parents, hard for you, but you know, that's nature, I guess. Hello.
Marna, hi. I have to say, it's such a privilege to have a wife such as you with so many years of experience coming to us for adult education during Advent.
Oh,
It's
Babies.
really intriguing to me. And also, as I'm listening this morning, thinking about why, Marna, through your years of experience being so deeply involved in birth, why God chose to come to us through birth.
mm-hmm.
I'm curious what you think with your experiences with birth.
You know, I don't, like I said, when I was in nursing school and I saw my first delivery, it was like so overwhelming to me and so powerful to see this life come out like this. And I was like, I got to do this. I got to be with this. So it was like an inner, I say calling. It was like an inner calling that came to me that said, this is what I need to do. And like I said, it took me a while to get there, but then I finally did, and I learned everything I could, you know, and then, but there's something about watching birth and giving birth that is, I don't know, it's overwhelming to me, and it's like life goes on, you know, life goes on, and this child is going to grow, and that's how our, you know, generations occur. And you see it like, like I said, they come in all sizes and shapes and packages. I've delivered Native Americans, Blacks, Asians, Hispanics, some who couldn't even speak English. And we'd talk through an interpreter, you know, and she didn't, when I was gone, she didn't want to see anybody else, you know. So had a lady from Nigeria come over, beautifully dressed in this Nigerian green and gold thing. She came in at 38 weeks, she had her baby, and I never saw her again. She never came back. So, I mean, but it was an experience. So, yeah. You got to wonder yeah, and you do have to wonder, what was it like for Mary to go through labor in a stable? Was there anyone there to help her other than her Joseph? I mean, the shepherds? I mean, you know, we don't know that, but.
And what I hear you saying in your comments right now is birth is universal.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone.
Right.
Mhm.
I'd be interested to know how many of us here were born at home. I didn't know about it because I was being born, but my father went and there was a lady I was born on a farm, a lady in the neighborhood that came and delivered babies, and I have no idea. She probably didn't have any degrees, but I'm here and I survived.
Midwife. Well, and that's how the medicine generally got started in the U.S. was when the, you know, pilgrims came over. And a lot of the women like that we talked about this at Bible study. A lot of those women were considered witches, and they destroyed a lot of them because they knew medicine, they knew herbal stuff, and they were using it. And so the people didn't understand it, but they were bad people.
So my mother, they lived on a farm, and the town nearest to them, it was like 6 miles away, had a midwife and she delivered babies in her home.
Mm.
So she had set up something in her home, but that was 1939. Who knows if she was licensed at that point? But my other grandmother, from a very young age, and this was in a little town of 700, 800 people, she just had a gift for caring for people. And so the little town doctor, she was his assistant for births. And so she would get a call on the phone at home saying, Esther, Luella Schmidt is in labor. Meet me there. And so they would be there, and she always got called for births. And she told stories about how back then, so this would have been, the 30s, that the women were supposed to stay in bed and
Mm.
couldn't even
Get out,
lift
yeah.
their baby for
Yeah.
a while.
And
Like,
stay in bed for a week afterwards?
yeah, and they couldn't
Yeah.
lift their baby. I think the baby could probably be placed on their chest or something, but
Yeah.
they couldn't get up and pick up their baby for and she said that was kind of the hardest part because a lot of those women didn't need to be in bed. You almost had to tie them in bed because they had chores to do. They had
Oh, yeah.
family to feed. They had
It's-
all this stuff.
And what we've learned from that is there's more things that can happen to you if you don't get up and move. The pneumonia and the blood clots, and we get them up and walk them right away and stuff now.
Well, I just want to tell a story. A lot of you know Russ Nelson and Dolores, who recently passed away. But they were born in the same bed on the same day. And it was because of a midwife who delivered babies at her house.
Oh,
And they just happened.
that would
to
have been interesting.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And they were married for what, 60, 70 years?
Connection at birth, huh? That's pretty cool. I think there was a nurse midwife out in California that did something like that. No, that's okay. I mean, they've learned so much about mothers and the connection to their babies. And there's video of a newborn being placed on a mom's chest, and that baby just crawls right up to that breast to start nursing. And so there's a lot of things they learn, and that's where they came in with the baby on mom's chest right away. So they make that connection and stuff.
Well, I'm born a long time ago. You all know I'm over 100. And I was born in a village. My dad had built a house by the time he had 4 daughters. The first daughter was born in somebody else's house, but then he had a house built. And except for the 4th one, who came 9 years after me and is the only other one living at this point, we were all born at home.
Mm-hmm.
And by then there was a place where the doctor had a place for just birthing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my youngest daughter sister was born. But I do want to say that the records and so forth weren't too accurate, because I do have in my file with birth certificates that I was born on the 8th of August, and one saying I was born on the 17th. And I was taught to celebrate my birthday on the 17th. So there was a lot of inaccuracies around at that time.
Well, like I said, it was around the early 1900s that prestigious women went to the hospital, because that was the thing to do. Yeah. The rest, if you couldn't afford it, were born at home. So that's kind of where that took off from.
Well, my family went full circle. My grandfather was born and died in the same room.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope it was enough.
we don't have a program down here next week, but Laura, do you want to give us a little preview of what's happening at this time next week?
next week at 9:15, we're all going to gather in the sanctuary. And boy, I haven't counted, but I think it's over 60 musicians from Midvale will be putting on a concert. Includes the choir, a little women's women's ensemble of 6. They've called themselves the Midvale 6, and the brass choir or the brass ensemble and the handbells and a new string quartet from Midvale that Tyrone has put together, and Nan Faith is going to sing. Karen Kretschman's going to sing. So if you come to 8 o'clock service, rush out, get your coffee and your treats, chug it down, and then come back in. So we'll see you next week.
Well, the other part I forgot.